Allan Hancock and Ferrilli are very excited to share our story. Together, we leverage their existing banner and DegreeWorks data to improve graduation rates and save valuable time for academic advisors and student services. During this presentation, I'll introduce you to the team, provide a brief overview, share our outcomes, discuss the implementation process, go over real-world challenges, and wrap things up with a summary. I'd like to introduce you to the team. Dr. Kevin Walthers, President of Allan Hancock. Greg Pensa, Trustee at Allan Hancock. Dr. Nohemy Ornelas, Vice President of Student Services. Carol Thomas, Senior Vice President of Ferrilli, and myself, Robert Ferrilli. Next slide. For the past decade, community colleges have been focused on increasing graduation rates and improving student outcomes. Additionally, several states have changed the community college funding formula to favor those institutions with better outcomes. Title IV requires you to ensure academic courses apply towards degree program requirements. And equity. Equity is what is going to move the graduation rates up. 40% of all community college students who started their education in 2012 graduated within 6 years. But only 35.7% of Hispanic students and 27.5% of Black students graduated from a 2-year institution within the same time period. Furthermore, 55% of Black students who started at a community college in 2012 did not complete their studies and were no longer enrolled at any other institution. Next slide. As somebody that is first in family to go to college, the process is overwhelming. We found students just don't know to apply for graduation, or they don't know that they've earned a credential such as a certificate or a degree. Next slide. Thankfully, we have the computing power today to run degree evaluation on a large group of students. Additionally, we can do what-if scenarios to see if they qualify for a degree outside their program of choice. We have implemented this at 11 colleges, and we're always looking for ways to drive down costs to make this more affordable so all colleges can have it. We have developed the process for a Lucian colleague and a Lucian banner with DegreeWorks, but I am confident that we can implement it on almost any system. Think of the possibilities. You could use your existing data to identify students that are near completion. We can now automatically award degrees and certificates if appropriate. And again, it works with both colleague and banner. And we commonly refer to it as autograd. With that, I will hand it off to Greg Pensa, Trustee, to share the outcomes of our work.
I'm Greg Pensa. I've been a trustee at Allan Hancock Community College for the past 10 years, and I also serve on the State Board of Community College Trustees. In 2011, Allan Hancock College hired Dr. Kevin Walthers, and the Board of Trustees put an emphasis on degree completion. We were able to acquire some new funding from the state, and the results were immediate. Our graduation rates almost doubled. In 2011, we had 700 students graduate. In 2020, it was over 1,300. And this was done with basically the same student population. Degree completion is a major topic of discussion at the State Board of Community College Trustees, and it also affects our funding. Graduation rates are a key component in funding for community college based upon the student-centered funding formula. We appreciate the support we've received from the Chancellor's Office in our completion efforts. Ferrilli has provided Allan Hancock College with the means to analyze data and provide this information to our counselors in a more comprehensive manner. This allows our students to work towards their AA degrees in a more focused pathway. And here to give you a little more data about that and explain it is Dr. Kevin Walthers.
Thanks. So as Trustee Pensa said, when I came to the college in 2013, there were about 700 graduates a year, and the trustees made it really clear that they felt like we should have more graduates, that our local economy needed more college students. So we started working on that immediately, really focusing our faculty and staff efforts on figuring out what we could do to increase completion. We hired more counselors. We started doing a lot more advising for our students, and we started really focusing on getting educational plans. The next slide will show you some of those gains, and just by focusing on the problem, we started to see some really good gains. But we felt like we were missing one piece of that, which was students that were progressing through and had enough credits to earn a credential, but hadn't realized that yet. And if you look at the next slide, it shows you from 2019 to 2020, we went, after we celebrated in 2019 that we surpassed the 1,000 graduate mark, this year, because we were able to auto award our degrees, we actually jumped up to over 1,300 degrees awarded. We'll see, and Dr. Ornelas will talk about this in a minute, about how this has a huge impact from an equity perspective for our Latinx students, as they really struggle as first-generation college students to understand the process by which you actually apply to get a credential. It's also having real-world impacts here in our community. If you look at the next slide, we just finished doing an investment analysis of the impact on from the college to the rest of the community. And what we're able to show our community is that our community college graduates, our Allan Hancock College graduates, earn on average $9,200 more than their peers who only have a high school diploma. So if you start adding up those degrees from the time we started really focusing from the 700 degrees moving to 1,300 and start to multiply that out over the year, the economic impact of that for our community is an additional $15 million a year in additional wages. It's really important for a college of our size and a college in our location in California. The rent here is very expensive. It's an expensive place to live. So adding almost $1,000 a month to somebody's income in this community is a huge advance, and we're also starting to see our transfer numbers go up. Now this took a lot of people to get started. We appreciate Ferrilli and their help, and we had a large cast of staff and faculty who were helping out, and Dr. Ornelas oversaw that. So I'm going to turn it over to Nohemy and let her explain exactly what the process was that we used to bring this to reality.
Thank you, Dr. Walthers. I'd first like to just start by looking at some of our initial outcomes of our auto awarding initiative, and some of the driving forces that led us to start the conversations about equity and degree completion focused around a couple of regulations and state mandates. We adopted a statewide vision for success that really wanted to focus on students not only completing their courses, but earning a degree when they left Allan Hancock College in particular. So we looked at our federal regulations and our Title IV regulations that really are promoting funding and providing financial support for students with the end goal of completing a degree. We also had our Student Equity and Achievement Program that focuses on access to education, but looked at the goals of increasing our educational outcomes for our students that are disproportionately impacted. And lastly, I want to focus on our Ed code that really drives some of our policies and administrative procedures on our campus. Next slide. So the California Ed Code requires that districts confer associate degrees upon completion. And this was an important part of our conversation on our campus, because when we begin to look at institutional barriers, we really saw requiring students to submit a petition to receive a degree was an institutional barrier. When we think about students completing their high school diploma or their GED, they are automatically granted that diploma upon satisfying the requirements or completing an exam. So we really saw this as an access point and opportunity for our students. Next slide. This graphic shows you just some of our initial successes, and I'll talk about our timeline in just a second. When we began to auto award, what you see here is you see the data that shows the number of students that were auto awarded. So during this period of time between the fall of 2019 and the summer of 2020, we awarded an additional 470 degrees to students who were eligible without them having to complete an application process. We disaggregated the data to show that the majority of our students were our Latinx students. And when you look at that through the percentages, you'll see that that's 63% of the total number of students that were awarded a degree that year were Latinx students. Next slide. This is the total number of students who earned a degree comparison. So the maroon bars show you the students that were auto awarded, and the orange ones show you the students that filled out the applications or petitions. And so you can see that during this time period, we increased our number of degrees by 35%. So we were really excited to see some of our initial results. And I'd like to just go through the implementation process of who was involved and kind of our action steps that we took. Next slide. So the design process really focused on the implementation and establishing a timeline. We started these conversations during the spring of 2018. And that is when we began to have conversations with Ferrilli and exploring the options of what it would take to actually auto award the degrees. And what you see here is the list of groups and areas that were involved in implementing and launching this. So we had our IT staff, our director of admissions and records, our transcript evaluators, we had counselors, our public affairs department, and during the summer of 2018, that's really when we began brainstorming and identifying how we would be able to accomplish this. And this was no easy task. Not only did we have to think about how the programming would work, but also all of our practices and processes that we have in place for awarding degrees. Next slide. So what we did is we thought that this project would be easier handled by implementing it in different phases. And so our first phase was the phase of auto awarding students who had completed only courses at Allan Hancock College. We do have a process for awarding degrees for transfer students, but at this point in time, we felt that that would be the group that we would be able to address first, with the phase 2 of looking at military units. And phase 3, as you can see, we're still looking at those options for students who are transferring in with transfer credits. Next slide. And overall, communication was really important. Communication across campus to our different constituency groups. We communicated and began presenting information to our academic senate. We had faculty presentations in our different councils and committees. We also attended our associated student body government meetings and shared information to collect feedback. And then we provided some training for our staff. And we did this through a lot of different ways. We updated our websites. We notified students of their opportunities. And as I mentioned, professional development for our staff. And all of this was taking place during that initial implementation cycle of the 2018-2019 academic year. Next slide. And one important thing that we did was there were a lot of questions about students being given the option to opt out for various reasons. And so with the automation of our degrees, we automated a notification process. So our students are notified at the beginning of the semester to let them know that they're eligible for a degree if they complete their courses during that semester. As part of that notification process, they are also given information and guidance regarding opting out or seeking advice from a counselor. We also developed an auto-awarding frequently asked questions and made sure that we established a process for students to call and ask questions. We also set timelines and deadlines for students to opt out as well. And I want to share that the overall response from students was very exciting. They were very excited. And during this first implementation phase, we had fewer than 10 students opt out. Next slide. And as part of our auto awarding process and project, we also had the opportunity to partner with Parchment, and they actually provide electronic diplomas as well as do our mailing for diplomas. So this is an example of one of our students who is very proud. He has overcome a lot of obstacles, Arturo Regoza, who graduated through the auto awarding process. And this is what students receive. They not only receive a mailed copy of their diploma, which is processed a lot quicker than our offices can handle, but also an electronic. So they can post on social media, Facebook, they can add it to their LinkedIn. And I can tell you that as soon as these went out, we had over 200 students upload their electronic diploma to post on social media. Next slide. So in summary, we were very excited with some of our initial outcomes. We felt that this process and this project really served our students in supporting their completion of obtaining degrees. We know that this involved a lot of individuals on our campus, and it also allowed us to look at our technology and our systems to be able to integrate what we have to eliminate those barriers for students. And I think that the last thing we want to just share is just the overall attainment of creating equity on our campus for our students. So we look forward to being able to expand this project and share more positive outcomes. I am now going to turn it to Ferrilli to close the presentation.
I'm so delighted to hear of the success of this project at Allan Hancock College. As an educator myself, it is such a delight to see so many people have the experience of completing a degree and all the benefits that come from that. I wanted to share with you some results from other schools that have implemented what we call AutoGrad at their institutions. And so far those schools that we're reporting on are in Massachusetts, Illinois, and California. In those institutions, at one institution, they granted more than 60 certificates to students who didn't know they'd earned them in an early round of this implementation. One school realized a 70% increase in certificates in the first year and then has seen subsequent increases year over year. One school awarded approximately 500 additional credentials in the very first term using this solution on only one of their 3 campuses. And an additional school streamlined the graduation process, reducing the time their one evaluator spent manually processing each application to graduate. So these kinds of results are, again, they're very delightful to report, and we look forward to you experiencing the faces that we know others are seeing through this process when we offer a student a degree or certificate that they didn't even know was coming. And so we're very delighted to be part of this process, to have partnered with Allan Hancock and other institutions to support these important initiatives. And with that, we'll draw this conclusion to a close and thank our colleagues from Allan Hancock for presenting their successes, and look forward to seeing the next round of phase 3 and what it has to do for transfer students. And with that, we'll stop and take any questions that come along.